Have you ever found yourself criticizing yourself or stuck in a loop of shoulds, things you should do or should have done? What ifs? What if this happens? What if that happens? All those messages that we might be sending ourselves in micro moments that are eroding our ability to care for ourselves, to feel like we're thriving. If so, this is the episode for you. Hi, my name is Victoria Fontana. I'm a mindfulness and compassion teacher and an executive coach, and I work with people every day to help them develop themselves and work with those parts of themselves that are getting in the way of thriving and being their own inner hero. I have created this podcast to explore those knots that we create for ourselves as human beings and how we might use mindfulness and compassion and some coaching exercises even to untangle those knots. Last episode, I explored self-love and as a big topic, as a thing that we're told to do, but it's really hard to figure out how to love ourselves. And today we're continuing this conversation. I wanted to take a little bit more of a focused view on thoughts and messages that we're sending ourselves that work against this concept of self-love and self-appreciation. And one way is to look at those little micro moments that happen throughout the day. And we may detect them and we may not. And they might show up as thoughts, but they also might show up as body sensations, emotions that get triggered, or behaviors. And oftentimes, though, we could identify an actual thought beneath all of that, a belief. What does that voice sound like? Maybe it's criticism towards yourself. Maybe you're late for something and that becomes, I'm always late. And it's the weight of people judging you for that and kind of feeling like that means you're not as X, Y, or Z as others. Maybe you're a person who's a little bit untidy, and so you have clothes all over your room or dishes in the sink, and that becomes, I'm a mess. Again, we can turn this behavior or this pattern that we might have outwardly or challenge that we have and turn it into an identity. And that's really what we're first trying to do, is to not identify with the behaviors or the things that we're seeing in ourselves that we don't like. And so we can start to recognize those thoughts that are critical, and they often show up as shoulds. You should be more on time. You should be neater, or always, the absolutes. You're always late. You never turn things in on time. You're always waiting to the last minute. When we can start to detect that way that we're identifying with the criticism, that's huge right there, to say, wait a minute, I'm having this critical thought. I am not this thing that it's saying I am. So it could be objective. If your room is a mess or your house is a mess, objectively, there's a mess there. That doesn't mean that I'm unworthy as a person because I make messes. It might mean that I want to gain some skills, if that's what you want, and if that helps create well-being in your life, to be a little neater. But those two things are very different. And so there are messages that are helpful, maybe a micro part of that message, which is, hey, maybe you want to be a little neater. Maybe you'd feel better if you cleaned up after yourself, or maybe you'd feel better if you gave yourself more time to get out the door or more time to do a project, whatever it is. That little piece is that little helpful part of the criticism, and that's a helpful self-reflection. And then all the rest, you're no good, you're always late, everybody can't stand the way you show up late, everybody thinks you're da 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 da, whatever it is, you're going to get fired because you didn't turn this in. All of those fears that show up as harsh criticism, because if I'm not harsh enough with myself, I won't react. And so that mind of ours creates the worst scenario it can so that we stop doing whatever it is. So if we really hone in on those micro moments, like how do we listen for the concern and detect the concern without then believing the rest of the harsh message? How can we discern between what's helpful and what's not? And I think one of the keys, and I repeat this a lot, it's the attitude that we're bringing to our experience and ourselves. If we detect the criticism and then judge the criticism and then are harsher on ourselves for even feeling a certain way, now we're adding more fuel to the fire. We do this by very carefully and very kindly allowing things to be however they are. If you fly off the handle, if you get triggered, if you start on that self-criticism loop, allowing it to just be what it is. Okay, I'm hearing you. Here's the voice. Here's the body reaction. Oh, I walked into the meeting late and I felt embarrassed. And so there's the body reaction. Whatever is there, we allow it to be there long enough to explore it, to be able to be conscious of it. It's almost as simple as shifting that light of attention to what is going on towards ourselves. And it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And once we start practicing that, it's like anything else. There's a learning curve. It's hard at first. It might feel uncomfortable. But once we do, we can really work with it. And so my invitation is to actually start to look at those little micro messages that you're telling yourself. And they might be self-criticisms, or they might be the voice of someone else, or old messages, old patterns, whatever they are. If we open to them and practice noticing throughout the day, we enter through the door of the body. Oh, here's a body sensation that feels uncomfortable. What is going on? We can open through the door of the emotion. Somebody says something and there's an emotional trigger. And we can open to the door of thoughts, noticing what thoughts are going to our minds. So we can interrupt these moments. And that's that breaking through the automatic pattern. And that's something that we learn a lot in mindfulness as a very first lesson, is to get off of autopilot and then look, explore, get curious. That curiosity opens the door to seeing what's there and detecting all of those things. Just like anything else, the inner critic is something that occurs under the surface when we're not looking. And so the next time one of these messages appears, I wanted to leave you with a practice that you can do in the day-to-day. It's not a meditation. It's not a long practice. It's a little informal practice. And you're on the mission of self-exploration of the inner critical voice, or those little messages that undermine your well-being, or whatever you want to explore, whatever pattern you're noticing in yourself. And it might be something you recognize as a thought, as a general sense of discomfort or an emotion, whatever it is. And you say, every time X happens, I'm going to pause and just look, just explore and gather information. And you don't have to do anything with it, but allow yourself to look without more judging, noticing judgments if they show up, but not taking them so seriously, with curiosity. Isn't that interesting? Every time I'm in the presence of so-and-so, I get triggered. Or every time I notice the mess in my room, I'm telling myself a message. Every time I notice my computer, I'm telling myself this message about how you're not doing the work you should be doing, how all the people that are expecting that work are going to be disappointed in you. There's a whole story going on. And then you open and recognize that. And just take inventory. And by doing that, we start to recognize those small little moments and those small patterns and messages that are kind of happening under the surface throughout the day. And once we start detecting them, then we could take the next step to say, hey, what of these things are helpful and what of these things are not helpful? Maybe our confidence and self-love is built through these tiny moments too. The moments where we fall behind, or we make a mistake, or we feel awkward, or we just don't meet our own expectations or somebody else's expectations. And these moments seem very small, and then we move on with our day, but they do accumulate. And each little micro moment gives us an opportunity to see what is going on, to see inside ourselves, to see what's helpful and what's not, and gives us an opportunity to show up for ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me today. If there's anything you'd like to untangle or work with, please feel free to put that in the comments. I'm Victoria Fontana, and this has been No User Manual, podcast for life without instructions. Take care, everybody.